Hashtag Game Miraculous. Chapter 1. Micah, how could you? The words from the multicolored haired boy rang in Micah's head. How had he screwed up this bad? Felix was shaking his head, a look of disgust on his face. No, I didn't mean to. Micah stood there with a panicked expression as he watched the slender woman grin and tightly clutch the red earrings. She smirked and tossed Felix to the ground. And to think I thought you to be a worthy opponent. You can keep the boy. Micah rushed to help him up, only for Felix to push him away. Don't touch me! Micah shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. Please, I thought you would get hurt. I love you. More than Paris. All of my friends, my mom, they're goners now because of you. Cat Noir, his partner and one of his best friends, knelt by the wall, battered and bruised, arms chained painfully backward. He spit at Micah in disgust. To think I trusted such a coward, he snarled at him through gritted teeth. Suddenly Micah was surrounded by his parents, his class, and Lady Moth had gotten much bigger. As they crowded around him, the chant alternated between "We hate Scaraby" and "We hate Micah." Lady Moth opened her mouth to speak, but all that came out were beeps. Micah woke up with a start and gasped. He rubbed his face and ran his hands through his hair. Well, that sucked. His Kwame, Tiki, rushed to wrap her arms around his cheek. He smiled a bit and reached up to rub the top of her head with his finger.
Another bad dream, Micah?
Yeah.
Want to talk about it?
No. I want to try to get a shower in. I still feel Limburger all over me. He shuddered and headed to the shower. God, Lady Moth really had some stinkers. No pun intended. But maybe that just meant all in all nobody had too bad a day? He found some minor comfort in that. The steam in his soap made him feel better. It was dumb, but he felt like he was washing the nightmare off. Felix sat at the end of a depressingly long table. Actually, it wasn't the length of the table that was depressing, but rather the emptiness. Felix was the only one there, even though there was room for a dozen. He stirred his food with his fork, but didn't do much eating. He looked up from his plate when a door opened and a black-haired man in a suit stepped in. He held a tablet cradled in his arm and was prodding at it with a stylus. Nicholas, Felix spoke up, will my mother be joining me for dinner tonight? Nicholas was his mother's assistant. He knew more about Felix's schedule and his mother's schedule than either of them did. Your mother has a very important meeting with the casting director of her new short film tonight. She will not be attending dinner. Nicholas pushed his frameless glasses up his nose as he spoke, not looking up from the tablet. I might as well just eat in my room then, Felix mumbled. Felix, you know your mother doesn't allow you to eat in your room, Nicholas answered. Before Felix could protest the ridiculousness of that rule, Nicholas interjected. Are you through? Felix sighed and set his fork down, leaning back into his chair. Yes. Nicholas removed the plate from the table and disappeared behind the door again. While Felix sulked, a little black feline Kwame flew out from the pocket of his overshirt. Who needs her anyway? That means there'll be more for me. Plag always knew how to make him smile. Let's go, Plag. I don't want to be late for school. As if that were even possible. His driver would have never allowed him to be late to anything, and that day would be no exception. Despite his early arrival, several of his classmates were already talking in the courtyard of the school. His best friend, Tori, and her boyfriend, Alden, were talking about how Micah was late. Again. I hope he gets here on time, Felix commented to Tori as the students filed into the classroom. Felix sat next to Tori in the front, and Alden sat in the row behind. After his shower, he got out, brushed his teeth, shaved his stubble, and put on his aftershave. When they bought him the full shaving set, his parents made such a big fuss in front of everyone from his class, and in that moment he just wanted to die. But he had to admit that he felt like a real man using the fancy safety razor and alum block. He wore a simple outfit, a white tee, black jeans, and a gray hoodie over it. He wore that hoodie every day, despite the frayed edges and broken zipper. He liked the breeze anyway. His parents were probably already downstairs getting things ready. They ran a small but popular cafe that all his friends went to, and if young people went there, the chic, not young anymore but trying to hold on to their youth crowd would also show up. He probably had time to check if they needed any help. He went to the fridge and looked for something to munch on.
Micah?
Yeah, Tiki? Oh, here. He passed her a macaron. She was probably just as hungry as he was.
Thank you. But Micah,
What's up?
don't you have to be at school early for testing?
The grape he had just popped in his mouth popped out. No! Was that today? He grabbed a carton of milk, slammed the fridge door, and headed out. He ran into a customer. Sorry! Get whatever you want! It's on me! He called out as he started rushing to cross the street. Tiki had raced after him to hide in the pocket of his hoodie. She loved that boy, but he was such a big silly sometimes. Micah came sliding into the room, just as his teacher was about to shut the door. Oh, good. I was worried about you, Micah. Sorry about that. He panted a bit, finally able to catch his breath. He finished his sad milk breakfast before tossing it and going to sit down. His teacher gave him such a look. He blushed a bit and looked away. All right, now that our growing boy is all done, we can get started. Micah got a pencil out and tried to blink himself away. He wasn't looking, was he? What was it this time? Alden chuckled, teasing his bestie. Micah chuckled and rolled his eyes at Alden. He looked down and saw Felix. It was almost annoying how much cuter he seemed every day. Felix turned over his shoulder as papers were handed out and instructions were given. Micah, I'm glad you made it, he said in a stage whisper. Glad I made it? Maybe that's the in I've been waiting for? Every day, Micah wanted to ask Felix out, and every day he chickened out. He wasn't totally hopeless. Anymore. He could talk to him in complete sentences, at least. Micah grinned wide. So am I. I love testing day, he answered at a regular volume. I love testing day? Since when? Who cares if I can talk to Felix in complete sentences if everything I say is nonsense? Micah, shush! The teacher shook his head and handed him his test. He nodded and took his paper. Felix chuckled at the scolding Micah received from the teacher. He couldn't help it. Micah was such a goof sometimes. Good luck, he whispered even quieter than before, and then turned back around to face his desk. He was just glad to have friends like these. Growing up, being homeschooled, he didn't ever really have friends. When he did try to make friends at casting calls, it never turned out well. Child actors were surprisingly mean. Tori turned back and winked at Alden. Micah was so hopeless. It was really fun to watch. Alden was used to having his conversations with Micah end abruptly when a certain cute boy was around. Not just any cute boy. The cute boy Micah had been pining for all school year. He was really hopeless. Alden and Tori had rigged so many situations to get them alone so Micah could confess his feelings. It was Alden's mission as Micah's best friend, and basically second nature by now. He caught Tori's wink and responded with a knowing smile. The test lasted for 2 hours, and Felix was among the first to finish, in just over half the time allotted. He spent the rest of the time obsessing over Scarabee. He wrote fake declarations of love in his notebook that he'd never actually have the courage to say. Or maybe he would. He'd have to rehearse it first. For now, he'd stick to casual flirting. It had to work one of these days. When the testing time was over, Felix closed his notebook and slid it into his book bag. Micah, on the other hand, took every bit of time. He made sure to study with his free time, but some of the questions didn't even seem familiar. It was a lot easier for him to remember something when he heard it in class. But when someone was akumatized in class, the material was just assigned as homework. It was so much harder on his own. Tiki tried to help, but just no. Once the test was over, Micah stood up and stretched a bit. He looked at Alden. I'm glad that's over. I think I did all right, though. Alden was leaning his elbow on the desk, resting his chin on the back of his hand. Dude, you always do great. Don't worry about it. Micah smiled softly. Alden was the best, always able to help him calm down. And he was right. He usually did pretty good. And even if he didn't, the test was over. All he could do was wait and hope for the best. How do you think you did? Felix asked Tori. Tori shrugged. I think I did all right, but I think I could go for a snack right about now. She stood up and turned towards Alden and Micah. If only there was some place close by that we could get a bite to eat. Alden stood up at Tori's suggestion of a snack, his hands planted on the desk. I think that's a great idea, he quickly agreed. He looked from Felix to Micah, but Micah wasn't paying attention at all. Micah had been looking at Alden, the teacher's desk, the window, anywhere else. The last thing he wanted was to get caught staring at Felix like a creeper. Tori rolled her eyes and giggled. Hey, Micah! He looked over at her and rubbed the back of his head. Oh, sorry, what's up? He chuckled a bit. All right, I can look in that direction a little bit. She smiled and shook her head. I was thinking we could all get lunch at your place or something. Micah nodded. Yeah, okay, that'd be cool. Alden smiled at Felix and was about to say something to Micah when Tori interjected. Yeah, that's perfect. I want a mocha latte. Sorry, guys, that sounds like a lot of fun, but I have to go to an audition. Felix shouldered his bag. Maybe next time. He smiled apologetically at Micah before he left. He can't make it. Micah tried not to look too bummed out. He smiled at him as he left. Good luck! Break a leg! Do great! Tori giggled and put a hand on his arm. I'm sure he gets it. Micah blushed and relaxed. He hated how stiff he made himself around Felix. Alden was calm around Tori. It sucks that he had an audition today. We haven't all gotten to hang out in a long time. Tori moved up to their row to take Alden's hand and rest her chin on his shoulder. Yeah, if we could find out where he's auditioning, we can just bring him a snack. You could deliver it personally, Micah. She looked at Alden. He was a very resourceful boy, and she figured if anyone could track him down, it was him. Prompted by Tori, Alden retrieved his phone from his pocket with his free hand and was quickly able to locate the only casting call taking place at that time. Of course! He exclaimed, and then turned his phone so Micah and Tori could see the article. Violet Silva is holding auditions today. It's only a few blocks away. You'll have plenty of time to take him something. He tugged on Tori's hand and pocketed his phone. Let's get going so you can give it to him before he has to face his mom, he suggested. Micah was on board and looked at Alden. Part of him was wondering if this was too selfish a reason to get Scaraby's help. He could already imagine the lecture from Tiki, and it wasn't worth the risk. Micah crossed the street to the cafe with Tori and Alden. He headed behind the counter and gave his parents a quick hug before he headed to the espresso machine. He had to make sure it was perfect. Not too strong, that might make him too hyper. Too weak, and it might just not be tasty. Tiki popped out from his hoodie.
You're bringing Felix a little treat?
Micah nodded. Yeah, and then I'm going to stick around and walk him home. He'll tell me all about his audition, and then when the moment is just right, I'm going to ask him out.
Aw, I'm proud of you, Micah. I believe in you.
Once he finished the drink, he slipped a chocolate croissant into his sleeve. He almost forgot napkins, but he'd been overthinking everything in this delivery too much not to get some. Maybe too many. He also gave Tori and Alden some coffee and what they had ordered. Tori definitely noticed the difference in preparation. He had been talking to himself while he made Felix's. Their drinks took half the time. She took a sip of her mocha latte and giggled. I can taste the love. Micah smiled. Thanks, we should get going. He was in such a hurry. Tori held Alden's hand. I think it might actually happen today. She usually didn't. A few blocks away from the school, in a corporate building, sat the Violet Silva. She sat in between the producer and the casting director with crossed legs and pursed lips. Before the loss of her husband, she had been incredibly pleasant to work with. Tough, but fair, and always willing to work with actors when the talent was clearly there. But now, if someone didn't leave crying, it wasn't a job well done for her. Of course, Violet didn't let the tabloids know the real reason for her sudden shift. She had much more important work to do. Her darkest secret was that she had taken on the identity of Lady Moth. She would use every opportunity to find the next candidate to help her get Scaraby and Cat Noir's Miraculouses. And what could be a better place to find negative emotion than an open audition? The 2 roles for her short film were left vague and the characters were even unnamed. Literally anyone could try out for the chance to get a part. And adding a Violet Silva feature to your resume was the key to all the best roles. The auditions were open until the end of the day, which had been done intentionally. She made sure to tell Nicholas that Felix needed a full schedule today. He always tried to audition. Not casting him was one thing, and she'd do that easily, but she didn't want him here when the building was most likely going to go down crumbling in a few hours. The producer smiled.
Have you liked anyone so far?
Not particularly. No one has stood out to me yet. I'm sure we'll find someone. But I could use another break. Let's start back up in about a half hour. She kept adding little breaks in, despite the time crunch. A lot of these actors had second jobs and were going to miss a shift just to audition. When they didn't get the part, that would be all the more upsetting. And that was perfect for her akumas. Plag poked his head out of Felix's shirt as he walked down the street towards the auditions.
We couldn't have gone to the cafe for just a little bit?
He whined.
I could really go for some cheese right now.
You could always go for some cheese, Plag. Besides, I have to get to my mother's audition. I just know I'll get the role this time. She'll finally be proud of me. Felix had landed many roles in countless other auditions. He'd appeared in plays and commercials and independent films, but no matter how many times he auditioned for his mother, he was always turned away. He never even got a call back. She always gave him a line about not being ready for her projects. This time would be different, he was convinced. Felix did not tell his driver that he was going to the audition. Georgina, his driver, would have refused to take him, and also alerted his mother, who seemed to go through a lot to make it as hard as possible for Felix to come to her audition. He had also made it a point not to tell his friends that his audition was one of his mother's. It was well known that Felix Silva had never appeared in a Violet Silva project. At the slight chance that he was cut from the audition, he didn't want his friends to be disappointed in him. He entered the building and followed the signs to the audition. There were a lot of actors he recognized from other auditions, and many he didn't. He overheard that Violet Silva was taking a break, so he sat down to look over his lines. Felix tried to keep to himself. Not only was he well known enough outside of his mother's fame, but he also showed up to nearly all of his mother's casting calls. The lobby was full of people waiting their turn to audition. Some were making small talk, some were rehearsing their lines, and some were touching up their makeup. Despite how much everyone wanted it, there was a very calm atmosphere. That was abruptly ended when a certain prima donna of the acting world burst through the doors.